The mocking laughter rang out as Claire Monroe stepped aboard with an old fabric tote. Among guests flaunting designer brands, she was dismissed as an outsider unworthy of attention. But hours later, the sea thundered when a Navy destroyer stopped. Directly in front of the yacht, to everyone's shock, hundreds of sailors stood in solemn salute, and Claire quietly raised her hand in return. Wait, how did this woman mocked for her simple clothes command such respect? Stay with us on Thread Tales to uncover the truth behind this unforgettable moment. Claire stood there, her beige dress catching the breeze, her loose black hair shifting slightly as she gripped that worn tote. She didn't flinch when the laughs hit, didn't look down when a woman in a glittering gown pointed at her sandals and whispered something to her friend. The yacht was a floating palace-polished wood, crystal glasses, people draped in logos that screamed money. Claire didn't fit. She didn't try to. Her face was bare, no makeup, no jewelry, just her, standing quietly by the rail, watching. The waves, the guests, didn't know her, didn't care to. They saw someone plain, someone who didn't belong in their world of wealth and flash, and they let her know it loudly, cruelly, like it was a game. Before we go further, if this hits you, any of you watching who've ever been looked down on, judged for how you look or where you come from, take a second, grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to Thread Tales. It means the world to keep sharing stories like this. Stories that remind us who we really are. Right, let's keep going. Why would a Navy destroyer salute someone these elite guests mocked? Hold on to that question as we dive deeper on Thread Tales. The first to strike was a woman named Vanessa, mid-30s, her blonde hair pinned up in a way that looked like it took hours. She wore a white dress that hugged her frame, diamonds flashing. On her wrist, she leaned toward a man in a tailored suit, her voice carrying over the deck. She looks like she's headed to the market, not a yacht party. Her laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. The man chuckled, his eyes scanning Claire's simple dress. This is for elites, not dock workers, he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A few others joined in, snapping photos of Claire. As she stood alone, her back to them, staring out at the sea. They posted the pictures online, captions dripping with mockery. Claire didn't turn around. She didn't react. She just let her fingers brush the rail, steady as ever. A new voice cut through the chatter. From a woman in her late 40s, her neck draped in pearls, her smile tight and practiced. She was the kind who hosted charity galas but never gave without a photo op. She stood near Claire, holding a martini, her voice loud and syrupy. Honey, did you get lost on your way to the thrift store? The group around her tittered, their eyes darting to Claire's beige dress. The woman leaned closer, her perfume sharp, and added, "This yacht's for people who belong, not strays." Claire's hand paused on the rail, her fingers curling. Slightly, she turned her head just enough to meet the woman's gaze and said, "Belong's not about your clothes." Her voice was quiet, but carried like a bell in a storm. The woman blinked, her smile faltering, and the group went silent. For a beat before forcing more laughter, the yacht cut through the water. The sun high, the air thick with salt and judgment. Claire moved toward the back, finding a small bench near the edge of the deck. She sat, her tote resting on her lap, her posture straight but not stiff. A group of younger guests, all in their 20s, sauntered over, sunglasses perched on their noses, like they were posing for a magazine. One of them, a guy with slicked back hair and a gold chain, smirked. "Hey, do you even know the bow from the stern?" His friends laughed, egging him on. Another, a girl with a fake tan and a neon bikini, pointed at Claire's sandals. "Careful not to fall over, hun. You'll be seasick in 5 minutes." They shoved a pair of binoculars into Claire's hands, giggling. "Go on, play Navy for us." Claire looked at the binoculars, then at them. Her eyes were steady, cold. She handed the binoculars back without a word. The group walked off, still, laughing, their voices echoing across the deck. The captain, a wiry man in his 50s with a weathered face, caught Claire's eye as she passed the helm. He froze for a split second, his hands pausing on the wheel. Something about Hertha, way she stood, feet planted like she'd walked 1,000 decks. Her shoulders square but relaxed made him stop. He gave her a nod, quick but deliberate. the kind you don't give to just anyone. The other guests didn't notice, too busy sipping champagne and posing for selfies. But a few caught the exchange, their brows furrowing. "Why is he nodding at her?" a woman in a red hat muttered. "To her husband? She's nobody." Claire nodded back, just once, and kept walking. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. A man in his early 30s, his shirt unbuttoned to show off a tan he'd clearly paid for, swaggered over to Claire. He was the type who name-dropped CEOs and bragged about his yacht club membership. He held a whiskey glass, ice clinking, and grinned like he was doing her a favor by speaking. "You know, you could have at least tried to dress up," he said, loud enough for his friends to hear. "This isn't a soup kitchen cruise." His buddies laughed, one of them snapping a photo of Claire's tote bag. The man leaned in, his breath sharp with alcohol. "What's in there?" "Your life savings." Claire's eyes flicked to his glass, then back to his face. "Careful," she said, her voice low. "The spills are hard to clean." He laughed, but it was forced, and he stepped back, his grin slipping as she held his gaze a moment too long. The afternoon stretched on, the yacht gliding past cliffs and open water. The guests grew louder, their laughter fueled by wine and arrogance. A man in his 40s, broad-shouldered with a Rolex that caught the sun, strutted over to Claire. He was the kind of guy who thought money made him untouchable, his voice dripping with entitlement. "What are you, a professor of oceanography?" he said, grinning as his friends snickered. Vanessa, the blonde from earlier, chimed in, her tone fake sweet. "Don't spoil the party with fake expertise, sweetheart." Another woman, older, her face tight from too many procedures, leaned in. "You're just a tag-along guest. Don't act important." They clinked their glasses, toasting their own cleverness, their voices carrying over the deck like a wave. Claire didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, her hands resting lightly on her tote. Then came the moment that shifted the air. The group by the bar was still laughing, their voices sharp, when Claire spoke. Her voice was low, calm, like she was stating a fact. "If the current shifts in 12 minutes, your anchor won't hold." The words landed like a stone in still water. The group froze, then burst into louder laughter. "She's insane," the guy with the gold chain said, slapping his knee. "What is this, a weather report?" But the captain, standing near the helm, overheard. His face went pale. He didn't laugh. He turned quick and checked the radar. His hands moved fast, double-checking the readings. Sure enough, a strong current was rolling in, just like she'd said. He muttered something to his first mate, who rushed to reposition the anchor. The guests didn't notice, too busy mocking Claire, but the captain's eyes kept darting her way. Like he was seeing her for the first time. A young woman, barely out of college, her hair streaked with pink, approached Claire with a smirk. She was the kind who lived for likes, her phone always out, filming everything. She held it up now, pointed at Claire, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Hey everyone, check out the yacht's new deckhand." Her friends howled, some clapping, others pulling out their phones to join in. The girl zoomed in on Claire's sandals, narrating for her followers. "Who wears these to a party like this?" Tragic, Claire didn't look at the camera. She reached into her tote, pulling out a small folded cloth, a faded navy blue. The kind sailors used to clean their hands after a long shift. She wiped her fingers slowly, like she was brushing off their words, then tucked the cloth away. The girl's smirk faltered, her phone lowering slightly, but she kept filming, desperate to save face. The yacht rocked gently, the sea stretching endless around them. Claire stayed at the back, her tote now on the bench beside her. She leaned against the rail, her face unreadable, but her fingers traced the edge of the tote, slow and deliberate. Years ago, she'd carried that same bag onto a different kind of ship, one made of steel, not luxury. A ship where men and women stood at attention when she walked by, where her word was law. She'd been younger then, her hair tied back, her uniform crisp. The memory flickered in the way she tilted her head, catching the sound of the waves, the same rhythm she'd known on those long nights at sea. She didn't dwell on it, she just watched the water, her face calm, her silence louder than the chatter around her. The mocking didn't stop. A new voice joined in, a woman in her late 20s, her hair dyed platinum, her nails long and red. She was the kind of person who thrived on attention. her Instagram full of pose shots and captions about living her best life. She stood close to Claire, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Seriously? Who even invited her? She's ruining the vibe. The man with the Rolex laughed, egging her on. Yeah. What's with the tote bag? Did you pack your lunch? Or something? The group erupted again, their laughter sharp, cutting. Claire's fingers paused on the rail. She turned just enough to meet the woman's eyes. You're loud, she said, her voice steady. No venom, just fact. The woman blinked, thrown off, then forced a laugh. But the air shifted. A few guests glanced away, uneasy. A man in his 60s, his suit impeccable, his hair silver and slicked. Back approached Claire with a condescending smile. He was the kind who owned companies, not just shares, and spoke like every word was a favor. He stopped near her, swirling a glass of red wine, his eyes narrowing. You must feel so out of place here, he said, his tone almost kind but laced with pity. This isn't your world, is it? The group nearby leaned in, eager for her response, ready to laugh. Claire tilted her head, her eyes meeting his. She reached into her tote, pulling out a small brass compass, its edges worn but polished. She held it up, letting it catch the light, then said, I've navigated worse. The man's smile froze, his wine glass still, as the compass gleamed. A quiet challenge in her hand. The sun dipped lower, painting the sea gold. Claire stayed where she was, her dress catching the light, her sandals scuffed but steady on the deck. The captain passed by again, this time slowing his steps. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered on her, ascertained the cause of this extraordinary moment on Thread Tales. Hit that like button and subscribe to uncover the shocking truth about Claire's identity. The captain didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered on her, like he was trying to place her. He'd seen her kind before, people who didn't need to shout to command a room. People who had seen things, done things others couldn't imagine. He tipped his cap just slightly and moved on. The guests noticed this time, their whispers growing sharper. What's with him? The woman in the red hat said, her voice low but annoyed. She's just some nobody. Why's he acting like? She's important. Claire didn't react. She just shifted her tote, her movement slow, deliberate, like she was measuring the weight of the moment. A woman in her early 30s. Her dress, a bright emerald green, her earrings dangling like chandeliers, sidled up to Claire. She was the kind who always needed to be the center of attention, her voice loud, her gestures big. She held a champagne flute, her nails tapping against it. You know, you could at least smile, she said, her tone sharp but playful, like she was teasing a child. You're bringing everyone down with that serious face. The group around her laughed, some raising their glasses in mock salute. Claire's eyes flicked to the woman's earrings, then back to the sea. She adjusted her tote, her fingers brushing a small faded patch sewn into the side and navel insignia, barely noticeable. Smiles don't change the tide, she said, her voice even, almost soft. The woman's laugh caught in her throat, her flute trembling as Claire's words hung in the air. The party kept going. The music louder now, the drinks flowing. But something was off. Captain's nod, his quick action on the anchoret hung in the air like a question nobody could answer. A man in a linen suit, his hair graying but his ego untouched, leaned toward his wife. Maybe she's some kind of consultant, he muttered, or a friend of the owner. His wife, her lips painted coral, shook her head. No way. Hey, look at her. She's nobody. But her voice wavered just a little. Claire didn't hear them, or if she did, she didn't show it. She opened her tote, pulling out a small worn book, a field manual, its edges frayed. She flipped a page, her eyes scanning the words like they were old friends. The gesture was small, but it caught the eye of a quiet man standing nearby, someone who hadn't joined the mocking. He squinted, like he recognized the book, but said nothing. A young man, barely 25, his sneakers bright white and his watch oversized, strutted over to Claire. He was the kind who thought youth and money made him invincible. His voice loud, his grin cocky. He pointed at her tote. What's in there? Your grandma's knitting? He said, his tone dripping with mockery. The group laughed, some mimicking knitting motions, their phones out to capture the moment. Claire didn't flinch. She reached into the tote, pulling out a small folded map, its edges creased from years of use. She unfolded it slightly, revealing a grid of coordinates, then tucked it back. "Some things are worth more than your watch," she said, her voice calm, her eyes steady. The young man's grin faded, his friends' laughter stuttering as they saw the map, a flicker of doubt crossing their faces. Then the sea changed. A low rumble grew in the distance, like thunder, but steadier. Heads turned. The guests stopped talking, their glasses paused mid-air. A massive silhouette broke the horizon, a Navy destroyer, its gray hull cutting through the waves like a blade. The yacht's deck buzzed with excitement. Oh, selfies for Instagram. Ow! The platinum-haired woman shouted, pulling out her phone. Others followed, snapping photos, their voices loud with thrill. But as the destroyer drew closer, something shifted. Its horn blasted, long and solemn, not a casual greeting, but something heavier. The guests froze, their phones lowering. Navy officers lined up on the destroyer's deck, their uniforms crisp, their faces serious. They stood at attention, their salutes sharp, unwavering, and every single one was aimed at Claire, a woman in her 50s. Her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her designer scarf fluttering, stepped forward, her voice shaking with disbelief. "This has to be a mistake," she said, loud enough for the deck to hear. "They're not saluting her. No way." Her husband, a man with a permanent scowl and a cigar in hand, nodded. "She's just a guest. Probably some mix-up." Group clung to their words, desperate to believe it. Claire stood still, her tote now at her feet, her hands loose at her sides. She didn't acknowledge their whispers. She just watched the destroyer, her eyes tracing its outline like she knew. Every inch of it. The captain of the yacht, standing nearby, turned to her, his voice low. "Ma'am," he said, almost a whisper. The single word silenced the group, their faces tightening as they realized he wasn't talking to them. The yacht went quiet. The man with the Rolex coughed, his drink spilling slightly. "It can't be because of her," he stammered, his voice thin. Vanessa, her diamonds catching the fading light, shook her head. "They're saluting the captain, obviously." But the captain wasn't moving. He stood by the helm, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on Claire with something like awe. The guests turned to her, their faces pale, their laughter gone. Claire didn't speak. She stepped forward, her sandals soft against the deck, and raised her hand. Her salute was slow, precise, like she had done it 1,000 times. The destroyer's horn sounded again, a deep, reverent blast that shook the air. A voice crackled over the destroyer's loudspeaker, clear and commanding. "We welcome Admiral Claire Monroe, commander of the EC operation." The words hit the yacht like a wave. Glasses clinked as hands trembled. The woman in the red hat gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The man with the gold chain stared, his mouth open, his sunglasses slipping down his nose. "Dear God," Vanessa whispered, her voice barely audible. "She's a legend." Claire's face didn't change. She lowered her hand, her movements calm, and turned back to the rail. "I'm retired now," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Consider this just my vacation." The words landed like a quiet thunderclap, silencing the deck. The guests didn't know where to look. The man in the linen suit muttered, his voice shaking. Maybe they mistook her for someone else. The platinum-haired woman nodded, desperate. No way an admiral would be on a yacht like this. Guy would. The Rolex forced a laugh, but it came out wrong, like a choke. Must be a name coincidence? But their words felt hollow, their confidence gone. Nobody met Claire's eyes now. She stood by the rail, her tote at her side, her posture unchanged. The air was heavy, thick with shame, the kind that sticks to your skin. The destroyer loomed closer, its shadow stretching across the yacht. A reminder of something bigger than their world of wealth and status. A young crew member, barely out of his teens, his uniform slightly too big, approached Claire hesitantly. He held a small radio, his hands trembling as he spoke. "Ma'am, the destroyer's captain requests permission to come aboard."
Oh.
Guests nearby froze, their eyes darting between the boy and Claire. She nodded, just once, her face calm. "Permission granted," she said, her voice steady, like she'd given the order 100 times. The crew members scurried off, his radio crackling as he relayed the message. The guests whispered, their voices low, frantic. "Did she just give an order?" The woman with the pink hair said, her phone forgotten in her hand. Claire didn't. "Look at them." She adjusted her tote, her fingers brushing the strap, and waited. Claire didn't stay still for long. She picked up her tote, her fingers brushing the frayed strap, and walked toward the bow. The guests parted without thinking, their bodies moving like they were pulled by a tide. The destroyer fired 3 ceremonial salutes, each one booming across the water, each one a hammer to the silence. Claire stopped at the bow, her dress fluttering in the wind. She raised her hand again, her salute flawless, her eyes locked on the officers across the water. They answered, in unison, their voices carrying over the sea, "Honor to the Admiral." The sound was raw, powerful, like a wave crashing. The guests on the yacht dropped some to their knees. Others just standing there, heads bowed, their arrogance stripped away. A small boat from the destroyer approached, carrying a naval officer in full-dress uniform. He stepped onto the yacht, his boots clicking on the deck, his face serious but warm. He stopped in front of Claire, saluting her again, his eyes bright with respect. "Admiral Monroe," he said, his voice clear. "It's an honor to see you again." The guests gasped, some stepping back, others clutching their drinks like lifelines. Claire returned the salute, her movements precise, then offered a small smile.
"You're good to see you too, Lieutenant,"
she said, her tone soft but commanding. The officer handed her a small sealed envelope, his hand steady. She took it, tucking it into her tote without opening it, like it was just another day. Claire turned, her steps steady, and walked back toward the cabin. She didn't look at the guests, didn't acknowledge their stares. Her tote swung lightly. At her side, the same bag she'd carried through missions, through storms, through nights when the world hung on her decisions. The memory of those days flickered in the way she moved, calm, deliberate, like she was still on a ship that answered. To her, the guests watched, silent, their phones forgotten, their laughter a distant memory. The captain followed her with his eyes, his cap still in his hand, like he was waiting for her to give an order. She didn't. She just kept walking, her sandals. Quiet on the deck, a woman in her 40s, her designer purse clutched tightly, whispered to her friend, her voice shaking. "I posted about her online," she said, her eyes wide with panic. "I called her a nobody." Her friend, a man with a silk tie and a nervous laugh, shook his head. Delete it now. It was too late. The posts were already spreading, screenshots shared across platforms, the comments piling up. Claire didn't know, didn't care. She paused by the cabin door, her hand on the handle, and glanced back at the sea. The destroyer was still there, its officers still watching, their salutes unwavering. She nodded just once and stepped inside. The yacht docked that evening, the sun gone, the air cool. The guests shuffled off, their voices low, their faces tight. Vanessa, the blonde in the white dress, didn't meet anyone's eyes as she left. She'd posted those photos of Claire online, the ones with the cruel captions. By morning, her social media was flooded with comments calling her out, her followers dropping like flies. The man with the Rolex, whose name was Richard, got a call from his company's board the next day. They'd seen the posts, heard about the yacht, his contract was terminated, no explanation needed. The guy with the gold chain, a wannabe influencer, named Jake, watched his sponsorship deals vanish one by one as brands distanced themselves from the backlash.
Oh, yeah.
None of them saw it coming. None of them said a word to Claire as they left. The woman with the pearls who'd mocked Claire's dress stood frozen as she stepped off the yacht. Her phone buzzed with a message from her charity board. She was out, her name scrubbed from their website. The young man with the oversized watch who'd laughed about Claire's tote found his yacht club membership revoked the next morning. No reason given. The woman with the emerald dress, who demanded a smile, saw her event planning business tank as clients pulled out, whispers of her behavior spreading. Each consequence landed quietly, like stones sinking into deep water. No drama, just truth catching up. Claire stayed on the yacht a little longer, talking quietly with the captain. He stood straighter when she was near, his voice softer, like he was speaking to someone he'd read about in books. She thanked him for his work, her words simple, her tone warm but firm. He nodded, his eyes bright like he'd just been given a medal. As she stepped off the yacht, her tote over her shoulder, a car pulled up, a black SUV, sleek but not flashy. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, his hair streaked with gray, his suit understated but sharp. He didn't say much, just opened the passenger door for Claire. The guests, who were still lingering, froze. They knew him not by name, maybe, but by presence. The air changed when he was there. Like the world shifted to make room. Claire slid into the car, her movement smooth, unhurried. The man closed the door, his hand lingering on the handle for a moment, like he was making sure she was safe. The guests watched, some turning away, others staring like they'd seen a ghost. Jake, the guy with the gold chain, tried to laugh, it off muttering something about big shots and their drivers, but his voice cracked and nobody laughed with him. The woman in the red hat clutched her purse, her knuckles white. Vanessa looked down at her phone, her face pale like she was, waiting for another blow. The man in the linen suit, his wife silent beside him, just stood there, both knowing they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The SUV pulled away, its engine quiet, its lights cutting through the dusk. Claire didn't look back. She didn't need to. The yacht was behind her, the guests were behind her, their world of noise and judgment fading into the night. She leaned back in the seat, her tote on her lap, her fingers brushing the frayed strap. The man beside her glanced over, his eyes soft but steady. Didn't ask how the day went. He didn't need to. He just drove, the road stretching out ahead, the sea still visible in the distance. The story spread, as stories do the yacht, the destroyer, the salute. It became a moment that lingered. For those who'd been there, it was a weight they carried, a reminder of what they'd done, what they'd assumed. For others, it was a spark, a story that made them sit up a little straighter, hold their heads a little higher. Claire didn't hear the whispers, didn't see the posts. She was already moving forward, her life quiet but full, her strength not in what she said, but in what she did. She'd faced worse than their words, worse than their laughter, and she'd walked through it, steady as ever. You've been judged. Haven't you looked down on, pushed aside, made to feel small? But you kept going. You held your ground. You're still here, and that's enough, more than enough. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with thread tales through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally, healing.